What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we are here with Craig of the Almighty Forbidden. It is great to be able to talk with you. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, man. I was going to ask you where you're located, but now I know.
Yep,
New York.
yep.
Upstate?
Nope, Brooklyn. Right, calling from Brooklyn right now. I live in Manhattan, but work in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn.
So, the hardcore capital of the world right here.
That's right. Fuck yeah.
Yep. But it's so awesome to have you here. It's so cool to see that you guys are back and absolutely killing it right now. I know a lot of people are wanting to know this, and you're probably getting this question a lot in the press, so we'll get this question over with right now. But can we be expecting maybe a follow-up to your last full-length album, Omega Wave, in a way, now that, Forbidden is back and doing stuff in a way? Or are we just going to sort of are you like slowly dipping your feet in the water and, slowly inching back into playing again?
I think both things are true. We are definitely slowly inching our way back into playing again. Three of us have done it for years, and then two of us have not done it. So there's going to be that acclimation period for both Norman Skinner and Chris Contos getting used to it. And we start practicing here in May. We have 3 months before Alcatraz, and then that's going to be really our only focal point, other than me doing some writing at home and maybe the other guys, both Matt and Steve, said they're going to try to contribute some stuff too. So, I've been writing lyrics, so that means that there's going to be music following. That's something I've missed for the last few years is being the main lyricist for my bands, and that's always been something that has been important to me in Forbidden.
And I was going to actually get into this later about Forbidden's songwriting process, but we can go into it now because I've always just thought that the lyrics to Forbidden, I've always said that like Forbidden was in a way like the thinking man's thrash metal band in a way, because I've always thought that like the lyrics to Forbidden were very, very compelling, especially with the last album, Omega Waves. That was technically my first Forbidden album because I was a teenager in 2010, so like I was just getting into metal at that time. But then when I go back to listening to Distortion or Twisted into Form, there really was a lot of interesting subject matter in a way. Did the lyrics that you write maybe help determine in a way like the sound of what we hear on every individual Forbidden album?
Well, they kind of run hand in hand. That's interesting you say that. And I love it when the generation like finds us, because they seem to be getting it from the point of view like dropping in cold as a good spot to get this band from, because we were in the midst of so many other things. And lyrically, when we started, a lot of it was written by Russ kind of by himself. I helped write a few songs on Forbidden Evil, but it wasn't, maybe March in a Fire was like the first song I really ever wrote, lyrically. I wrote in high school, and same with Follow Me, like the lyrically and musically. So those are like the first things that I ever really wrote by myself, the core of those songs anyway, and then the contributions by everybody. But yeah, and then after that, man, I as much as I love Forbidden Evil, lyrically, some of it makes me cringe because there was just no real depth perception. It's like, okay, we're just gonna. And I was a kid. You got to remember, I was a kid when we did Forbidden Evil, and then when I really started taking over on the lyrics, I was 20 years old, and we did Twisted into Form, and some of that shit. I think the riffs came first most of the time, and then I would try to imagine what those riffs sounded like and kind of paint the picture, and that was how most of the things happened. But on this record, I'm going to try the complete opposite approach, and I'm going to write my subject matter and figure out where I want to go thematically, and then I'm going to flip that into the music and try to paint those pictures with that, after the fact of knowing exactly what I'm going to write about, or more or less. I shouldn't say exactly because shit changes all the time. So
Does a
until it's down on tape, until it's down on ones and zeros, there's room to move shit around.
Is there almost like a lot of research that goes into that's involved? Like, is observation and experience, in your personal life, just as much as part of the songwriting process as sitting down with a pen and paper, or sitting down with a guitar, and coming up with ideas too?
It's all, for me personally, it's always self-reflecting. There are lyrics that Russ like came in with on Omega Wave. Behind the Mask was the one song he came in with like a pretty solid idea of what he wanted to do, and I just helped write the middle for him. We wrote it together, but he he had a solid idea on what he wanted to do on that song, but a lot of the lyrics are about, and I realize it more now. They reflect my personal, what I was going through, the growth or the battles and the war, because it's all psychological stuff. It's like yin and yang and the battle of, your psyche against your own other half of your brain. And that's kind of been the running theme on Omega Wave. Because it was our first album back in so long, I literally went into it thinking, let's write the most metal record that we possibly give people more than they even think that we're capable of, and we really delved into the conspiracy theories over the last 30, 40 years, every rabbit hole that we kind of jumped into, I really jumped into, and then I kind of saw some things coming, like, for example, Omega Wave is really about the power of algorithms on the internet, and just like, I knew that eventually people were going to stop thinking for themselves and just have choose a side that they follow, and that was going to be that. And that's where we are. That is exactly where we are. Overthrow. I knew that was going to be a moment where there was going to be some sort of uprising, but I was hopeful that the uprising would be an intelligent revolution. A revolution of the mind and a mind space, as opposed to an internet-driven twit mob. But I see some of these things coming clear as day. Other people saw them too, but I focused on them. I wrote about them, and that's what a lot of Omega Wave is about.
I've always was fascinated, especially because next year is going to mark 30 years since this album, but Distortion. Because one, I love the King Crimson cover. I think that was a really nice touch onto the album. But with
completely live. We did that entire thing in one take.
I know you took like the GNR Lies approach with it, which I thought was actually a pretty bold move. I think a lot of times people overthink covers so much, and it just seems so disingenuous. So this seemed like a very genuine sort of cover. But like with tracks like All That Is and No Reason and Feed the Hand and Hypnotized by the Rhythm, it almost seems like going back to the self-reflection element, I almost feel like in a way Distortion kind of almost in a way foresaw like the inner turmoil that we kind of get from like the sort of mental deterioration we as humans feel. Was that sort of like the concept behind that?
Absolutely very, very good analysis, young man. I say young man, but I'm sure you're in your 20s now.
I'll be 30 this year.
Yeah, man. Okay. Well, old man. No, you're right. And there was so much going on. See, people that look at things at a glance don't really look into like what was happening in the industry at that time, and they look, they just disappeared. And it wasn't that we just disappeared; it was the industry had changed completely. From the year 1991, 92. When Nirvana dropped, when they came out, it just changed everyone's industry, and all of us thrash bands became out of favor, and then death metal was still there, kind of rolling, and Pantera and Sepultura and White Zombie, but there was Slayer survived. Metallica, you could say whatever, they were always going to be big, and obviously they changed. But everything had changed, so there was a lot of self-reflection in there. It was 3.5 years to write. Sift through songs, probably had about 25 songs by then, chose those ones as the album. Distortion itself was actually, it's a kind of interesting, that one's an interesting song in itself, because it was written talking to Steve Jacobs, my drummer at the time, about, and Tim Calvert. We were having a conversation about fever dreams and nightmares, and when you have the fever, how absolutely tiny and insignificant you feel in that moment of fever, and you get those dreams where you're just, I don't know if you've ever had one, but where we're just like, it seems like you're just the tiniest little speck in this massive universe, and it's just like it's engulfing you. And that was the whole Distortion theme was about those dreams, and because it's a place that a lot of people go in their in the collective conscience. It's just this gigantic, overwhelming, I can't put my finger on it, oh my God, it's fucking huge. So that was what that was about. Hypnotized by the Rhythm was about, literally how shall I say, kind of the time frame that they put your mind on with mind control on television. Everything is like in increments, kind of to put you, 30-second spots, half an hour shows. Everything is like tick, 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 tick. So it was like just hypnotizing. It was the beginning of that really hypnotizing us and using uh, television. I mean, it was always kind of a little bit of mind control, but they really got it down in the 80s and 90s. And then it was like an art, that they had it down. The commercials, everything was, again, this is all like, my brain just kind of works this way. So yeah, there's a little bit of everything like that on that record.
Yeah.
And then Green was really about what I was going through personally. Like there's a lot, and I didn't really know as much as I was writing most of it about myself at that time, but I was, and it was a rough time.
Depending on if something is very personal, and I've kind of noticed that with Green as well. There was almost kind of like, this for lack of better words, but maybe sort of like a pessimistic sort of aura around it when you like compared like tracks such as like Turns to Rage or Over the Middle or Blank, even in a way. Like it almost seems like that there was almost kind of like approaching from a personal spot. I obviously could have put myself in
it was our fuck you album to everything. I you know what, we got all the anger up. It was once we were done with Green, like at least personally I did. I was like, okay, I'm done with the anger. I'm fucking whew, and I felt kind of like therapeutically cleansed. And then shit, the industry kind of brought us I mean, I told this story to Jamie Josta, and he's like, you what? But the label didn't know what to do with that record. They were literally frightened from it. They had no idea. It was just so angry, and it was about 3 years ahead of its time as far as what was coming next. Like bands like Slipknot and whatnot hadn't even dropped yet, and they were using like Green as a blueprint. Joey Jordison told me straight up. He's like, Green is like one of my blueprints for when I was writing the first Slipknot record. I'm like, oh shit, cool. And I didn't realize that kind of stuff, but we got offered a tour in Europe to go out on like 8 dates with, or 7 or 8 dates with Manowar. And I just said, no, I'm done. It's just like, I didn't come this far to be understood by a Manowar crowd, and it may not have been a mistake, but that was, to me, like I needed to go find a new journey and search for greater things, and that's when I started Man-Made God.
Yeah. So that's so Green was almost kind of like the "fuck you, I quit" sort of album, and I sort of got that sort of vibe behind it.
Well, it's what's funny, because it wasn't I quit. It was I quit after the fact, because if you listen to the song Fat, it was about how we're never going to give up, never going to give in. Feed us, feed us, like feed us. Fetus babies. It was just funny. There's always tongue-in-cheek lyrics written in Forbidden Stuff. There's always a sense of humor, always. I mean, I don't, nothing is taken too seriously in the band, and that's one of the reasons why I'm proud of us, is because we don't really never took ourselves very seriously. Yeah. But no, we didn't think we were going into it saying, we quit, but on some sort of subconscious level, maybe we knew that it was inevitable.
Yeah. Of course, but you did come back with a vengeance. I thought Omega Waves was one of the best sort of like comeback albums in a way, at least in the genre, and kind of moving into today's standards too, because it almost seems like it's a really good time to be a thrash metal band. Like Trauma is still touring after all that they went through. I just interviewed them a couple weeks ago, and then you got like the rise, and rest in peace to Riley Gale, but with the rise of bands like Power Trip and bands like Havoc and Warbringer, really carrying the torch of the thrash sound. Is it fair to say thrash metal's in pretty damn good hands, right?
Well, after all the dust settled and trends came and went, again, I'll refer back to the collective conscious. It figures out what it likes, right? And so old school thrash, meaning shit that's not fixed, not overly pro-tooled out, things that, don't sound perfect and are rough around the edges, have a staying power, right? And that's what the kids discover and find. You got all the stuff that's like newer, that's like really corrected and perfect, and then you got an album like Omega Wave, right? So because I produced that with Tim Narducci, and our approach was that this is my approach. He wanted to fix some things I just would not fix. I'm like, no, leave that. I like raw. I like the fact that Forbidden Evil and Twisted into Form and all these albums that we did have some edginess to them where it's not perfect. I don't need the drums moved around on the grid. I don't need, the guitars completely like aligned perfectly and sounding, like computerized machine guns. That shit is cool for some bands, and I do love it with some bands a lot, but I don't love it with thrash metal. I feel like none of the albums that have that perfection on them are going to last down the line 20, 30, 40 years from now. They're going to just sound like everything else. So the personality I maintain has to be there. So, when we write a new record, I'm going to maintain that same philosophy. Then I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, we're going to keep it raw, guys. We get a good take. Don't fuck with it. You can do it on Pro Tools. People they just sit there on the computer, but I could just move this around. It would sound so much tighter. I'm like, no, just leave it. So if you listen to a Megawave, it's very alive. It's very alive. It's done in an old school, kind of way. And even the guitars, like we did it like a lot of the old thrash bands used to do it with like, two guitars on the outside, one guitar in the middle, and that's kind of how we did it. I was on the outside, I put Steve in the middle. I just double tracked and never went back and really fucked with anything. We just bang, 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 bang. We just kept moving.
Well, what is there like a principle that applies to thrash? Because like one of my favorite albums that go into the sort of thrash category would be like Beneath the Remains and Chaos AD and Arise from Sepultura. They've fallen into that thrash, but they're called death metal as much as thrash. But then you have bands like Creator and Destruction, the whole German sort of thrash scene. But then but I see a lot of differences also within just the big four of Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, and Anthrax as well. So is there sort of like a cell nucleus that just ties in all of those references I've seen together? Like, because sometimes I wonder if thrash is really more of an, and I don't say it like it's a bad thing or I'm challenging it, but I feel like thrash is more of an imagery almost as it is a sound too.
Oh yeah, sure it is. I mean, it's a state of mind. And what happens is, and this is why I'm kind of glad that we pulled out when we did. What happens is you lose yourself sometimes in the midst of that. You feel like you have to be angry and you have to do this and you got to maintain this thing. And then when you move around within it and you shift your direction just a little bit, people get very offended. It's like, oh, how could you do that? I remembered you this way. These people were in your band. This is how it should be. And it's tough for any band that goes on a long time. Like Creator, they went through the whole gamut. Sepultura, they had some obviously major, changes within the band, but yeah, they went on the whole entire time too. So it's definitely a state of mind that's hard to maintain the entire time. I had to get away. I didn't play thrash from 1997 until 2008. I basically didn't play thrash. I played heavy rock, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about songwriting. I learned a lot of, so I gotta be real. I can't sit there and, I just tell you about Green. Once that moment came and went, it's like it was time to pull the parachute and jump out.
I don't fault though a lot.
Got to maintain that.
I don't fault a lot of the bands though for a lot of thrash bands experimenting, whether it would have been Megadeth's Risks or Sepultura going a little new metal with Roots. After Slayer put out Diabolus and Musica, I could say without hesitation that Tom Araya is my favorite rapper. So I think and I got that from Josh.
You don't like Rob Flynn rapping? Come on.
Oh, Rob Flynn is awesome at what he does. But I also feel like Machine Head really sure, they had a lot of thrash elements in there, but I don't think they ever tried. Because, Rob Flynn coming from Violence as well sort of had a lot of punk in his roots as well. So I feel like...
well, he started Forbidden Evil with us, right?
Yeah, I'm aware of that. But
okay. So he didn't really come from Violence. He came from Forbidden Evil and then jumped into Violence. But what I could tell you about Rob, because we're still really great friends, is that he always loved, when the very beginning of rap was starting is when I met him. And he was into the deep cuts New York stuff that nobody else was hearing. So Rob's always kind of had an urban. It's not fake for him. He wasn't jumping on any trends at all. He's just loved metal and he loved rap. Yeah. When Run DMC popped off with that first record, he was the first guy in line. So it's been real for him. It's just part of who he is.
Yeah. With every Machine Head album, you could tell they're one of those bands where if you play me 30 seconds of a Machine Head song, I'd be like, oh, that's off of Burn My Eyes, that's off of The Blackening, that's off of Catharsis. So it seems like Machine Head has always been a band that's sort of like experimented. But I think you as well,
Yeah.
because, you know, between Forbidden Evil as well as, you know, with Man Made God and Demonica and so many other like bands that you've been involved with, does the creative process or the creative mind frame change depending on the project you're with? Or is there sort of like a method behind the creative madness that sort of applies to everything you work with?
Well, years ago, that's a really good question. Years ago, right out of Forbidden, when I started doing Man Made God, I got introduced to Eric Kretz from Stone Temple Pilots because our roadie, our drum tech, Cole Gill, started working with STP. So when we started doing the demos for Man Made God, the very first demos, he passed one off to Eric, and Eric's like, I want to produce these guys. So I got to meet Eric. I was kind of in a very experimental phase at the very beginning of Man Made God, where it's super heavy. It was kind of a continuation of Green, but it had even more beauty to it. And but it wasn't as angry. It was weird. I tell people it's like finger painting with shit is why always my description. It was very raw and kind of beautiful and scary. We had a heroin addict singer that was, you know, just an incredible artist who didn't actually sing many words. He just did noises. It was a trip. So anyway, so I meet Eric, and then he knew where I was coming from. He's like, dude, I can feel your next level of songwriting like bubbling to the surface. You want to do something great. He's all, what you need to do is just follow the bell. Follow the bell. What does that mean? He's all, follow the bell. Follow your instincts. Take your instincts where they take you. Don't overthink it, and just see where you land. And that was the approach I took with after meeting him, and from ever since with anything I've done. You know, from Man Made God to Spiral Arms, Demonica, I just really contributed solos. You know, you know, Dress the Dead, it's the same thing. It's like I just follow the bell now, and I'll do that same thing with Forbidden. And what I do know is my approach for each band is like, okay, well, this is heavy rock, this is like a blazing metal. Like, of course, I just know that to put that in my subconscious, word we've used a lot today. I'll put it in my subconscious and then just go, and I'll follow the bell. I don't really overthink it. I feel like a lot of people do overthink things, and the best way to go about it is just to use your instincts and let them lead the way.
But when it comes to, you know, contributing guitar solos, because and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you also contributed some solos on Individual Thought Patterns from Death as well, right?
No, I just did the tour.
Okay.
I was asked to do that tour, and they'd already had Andy LaRocque on the album,
Okay.
and Chuck wanted me to join them in Europe, so I did.
Okay.
You know,
You
I didn't even have time to learn their songs. I literally had no time. Forbidden was recording our last demo, the one that got us signed, the day before we got together, and he came into Oakland just so I could practice with them. You know, it's a long story, but Giorgio calls me and says, Chuck wants you to do this tour. I said, dude, I don't have time. I'm working on a demo right now that I said, you know, I'm going to be in the studio. Like, I'm looking at my calendar, like literally the day before you guys want me to practice in Florida. And then calls me back the next day. Like, Chuck says he's going to come there. I'm like, what? I guess I ran out of excuses, you know, so I had to do it. So I had to learn their songs in the room on the spot.
Wow, that's impressive. That's not an easy thing to learn.
Chuck would just well, okay, it isn't. But this is where some people freak out and get all offended, but it's true. The approach was that Chuck would just sit down in front of me. He's all, yeah, dude, we'll just like, you know, drink some coffee, smoke a bowl, show you riff, then you play it. We'll do it 4 times, do it again. And so I learned the formula like really fast. And I realized how brilliant he is, because his songs sound so much more complex than they actually are to play on guitar. And Forbidden songs were quite a bit harder to play. And no one ever does a Forbidden song right, but you'll see a Death song done correctly, right? Like, people can figure it out. And so people get offended. What do you mean? It's so complex. I'm like, it is, but it's not. And he's smart, and he knew he had to play guitar and do it. So he had a way of writing things that sounded crazy because the way the drums and the bass were working around it, but yet it was relatively easy to play. So I learned a riff, so do that 4 times, and then that was my whole thing. And I said, do you want me to learn these solos? Like, I only got a few days. No, bro, just let the metal flow. So I just improvised on my own stuff. You know, if I would have been in the band longer, which I wasn't, and he offered me about halfway into the tour, do you want to stick around and then write a new record with me? And I was like, bro, I got obligations and I'm loyal, you know. there was a chance to stick around, but I was really, Forbidden was my baby, so I wasn't about to leave that or those guys hanging.
Yeah, and I give you credit for that. Death songs, by the way, are also very fun to play on piano as well. There are some death
Oh, I
songs.
bet.
Yeah, like
I bet.
I do know how to play a Crystal Mountain and a Moment of Clarity on piano. So
That's really cool. Yeah, those are songs. Yeah, that was off of the album after
yeah,
Individual, right?
yeah,
So yeah,
symbolic.
which is probably that one. What is that called? Symbolic.
Yeah, symbolic was
Is it
Crystal
symbolic?
Mountain, and
Yeah,
Moment of Clarity was off
symbolic and human.
Perseverance.
Ironically, are my two favorites with. Uh, Excuse me, of the newer era. Those are my two favorites, and of course, I do like Individual a lot. But I feel like Human and Symbolic are just so focused,
Yeah.
so focused.
I like the pun there, the cynic pun there, saying that it's focused. I just had to bring that up. But when it comes to like the emotional energy that you channel into your guitar soloing, is there at all maybe a similar emotion or energy that's channeled into how you play guitar as you write some of the lyrics as well in a way, or are they two completely separate forms of self-expression where like you could express one side of yourself on a lyrical standpoint that you can't with guitar and vice versa?
I'm going to compliment you on your questions. I find them
Oh,
all very,
thank
very
you.
cool and challenging and off the grid, and I do like that.
I
I really
appreciate it.
do. I
Thank you.
give you compliments for asking good questions.
Thank you.
Now, and I can answer that with everything is really mutually exclusive. They're all different, like, uh, but my approach to guitar solos, because I'm usually, unless I'm the only guitar player in a band, which I've been a lot, my approach to guitar solos is to write the most melodic sing-along solo that I can. I'm not really after the bazillion notes solo. I do a few of those, but that's not me. I'm the guy who wants it to fit orchestrated in the music, like as a piece of the music. And sometimes you can do that if you're a shredder too. There are guys that are phenomenal at it, but that's not my strength. I'm a songwriter, arranger, and I write melodies. So I write melodies on guitar. I write melodies and vocals. It's always that. And guys that are my heroes on guitar are guys like Elliot Easton from the Cars, David Gilmour, like as far But I would the Burners. I really like. Marty Friedman for his phrasing. So there are things I bend it. I take a note that's out of key and bend it into key. I'll do that from time to time. And just little things like that intrigue me more. And if I always have a guy on the other side of the stage who's like sweeping and shredding on that, then I feel like we're complete. Then we're complementing each other and we're not doing the same thing.
But inspiration, has a terrible habit of striking at the most inconvenient times. But like when you work on a song for a long period of time in a way, is it almost kind of hard to maintain that spark or that emotional energy that started the idea? Do you prefer to sort of like feel the same way on a consistent level through the making of a song?
I try not to, like, if a song takes too long, I mean, there's no set formula for this, but if a song takes too long, a lot of times it's not going to be that great. But there are songs that have been worked on in the history that, oops, sorry, my computer just shut down on me. Let me turn that light back on.
It's all good. I still see
But there
it.
are songs in the history that have taken a long time and they're phenomenal. I mean, there's no set one thing, but for the most part, if it gets written quickly, that's the best stuff. Like that's the most magical stuff because it happens relatively fast in some sort of explosion. But yeah, you can beat a song to death if that's what you're asking. It is hard to maintain that, and that's a lot of what happened between Twisted into Form and Distortion. Like some of those songs. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with the demos that we did, but like the first demo we did when Paul was still in the band was just melancholy and really melodic and acoustic stuff, and and people are like, oh, you should do stuff like that, but they want Forbidden Evil too. It's like, dude, you couldn't be asking for two further differences. It's like, like, well, how do you, I mean, you can like both, but you can't really, they're not really comparable. They weren't. So Distortion, we ended up axing a lot of songs between the writing process of Twisted and Form all the way into the ending of Distortion writing process. Like some of those songs just weren't special anymore. They just ran out of steam.
And because you mentioned like Green has some personal elements, but then you also tackle a lot of internal and external sources from a lyrical standpoint, and just as the fuel behind your music. So depending on the subject matter that a song could be about, either personal or more observational, does it resonate with you in a different way or hit you in a different way when you're playing it live or recording it or just revisiting it?
Well, that all depends. Like, it never resonates the same every day to day. I mean, sometimes you're not even thinking about what the song's about when you're playing it live at all. Like you're not. You played it so many times. I hate to use the word, but it becomes a little bit robotic just because you just played it so goddamn much. But then there's other times, like for instance, if we were to play a song like Blank off of Green, which Chris Contos, our drummer now, is like, we've got to do that. Like, I've never done that. Like, I've never done. But if we do that, I'm sure I'll connect to it much more, because that has so much personal stuff, and but a lot of the stuff's just so just so hard to play, that you're just like concentrating on playing it and the aggression of it all.
Yeah, I almost. So, yeah, oh, you were saying?
No, I was going to say, but that's for Forbidden. Other music I do. You completely get engulfed in like if you have more space between the notes, you can definitely fall into the emotion of it. The Man May God stuff, especially, had a ton of stuff, and the Spiral Arm stuff, where there are breakdowns and moments where where people are just like practically moved to tears.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also too, going to like more of the meaning and the emotion, I feel like, I've always said art is life, and when you bring it into the world, it can grow and it can develop. It can even eventually die sometimes.
Absolutely.
But like, do you feel that when people interpret it in their own way and it resonates with you in a specific way, that almost maybe adds another layer of context to it than when the song was first finished?
Yeah, again, these are great questions. I don't know how many people compliment you on your questions, but they're really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, they sometimes it swings back around. Yeah, sometimes I think that would be my answer. Like, sometimes it does swing back around, and you get recharged by it again.
Definitely. With this like new lineup of Forbidden, and having new members come into play, because obviously every member of Forbidden has also been involved in other projects as well. So with having Chris and Norman come into the fold, being that Norman played with Hellscream, I believe, as well as Skinner, and Chris has played with the Boneless Ones, and he played with Machine Head and some Testament here and there. Does this bring new stuff into Forbidden, and really, how did it all sort of come into the fold?
It absolutely brings new stuff into Forbidden. We needed it to do this again, because that was the problem with what happened to Forbidden towards the end of its run. From 2008 to 2012. In 2011, the entire time Russ was battling with alcoholism. Okay, the entire time, which is not unusual for metal guys, but he was one that was like really dependent on the booze day in and day out, and it affected his performances. So at no point live was Russ really able to give 1,000%, and that ended up chipping away at the enthusiasm from the crowd. They're like, "Yay! Oh yeah, he's not really going for it." He was really in a bad way. So that was one thing. And then at the end of 2011's run in Europe, we were about to do a European tour, and our drummer Mark Hernandez had to leave the band for similar reasons, because he was having bouts with alcohol and he was going to lose his family. Personal shit that just like he had to go. So then we canceled an entire tour. So again, these two things are like, wow. So you have to. There was no way with no Russ, obviously. It's going to be different, and I never thought I'd do it again. And I really wasn't looking for it. Had no anticipation about ever doing it again. I would talk to Russ to see how he's doing. He's recovered now. We got him into. Actually, Mark was instrumental in helping getting him into a program, which was great. And Russ called me one morning, actually texted me really late one night and said, "I'm not doing good, man." And I said, "Well, give me your address. I'll come see you tomorrow." And I did. He was like next to dying. He was drinking one of those giant jugs of Jack Daniels a day. So getting to the point with his new blood, but it couldn't have obviously been those guys. With Mark's situation, I couldn't introduce him into this version of the band because he has still obligations at home and couldn't go for long distances. So, but first things first, Norman Skinner was only brought to this thing by accident because we were doing this thing, Bay Area Interthrational, and it was a thing in Europe, and we were supposed to do it in 2020, but the Dynamo Festival asked me to do some sort of tribute to Bay Area thrash metal, and I said that sounds really boring, and so I had them fly me out and take a look. I mean, it's just like, what do you want? Like, so I had to think of something different. So I flew out to Europe at the end of 2019. Actually, well, it was summer of 2019. Checked it out, saw what they were doing, had a really good idea that everybody should not play their own songs. We should get guys from other bands, and no one plays their own song. We all kind of stand on the side of the stage. If anyone's going to play like an Exodus song, the Exodus has got to stand there, and vice versa, Death Angel, Forbidden, whatever. So we were getting ready. It finally came around in 2022, this last year, right? It finally happened. So it was suggested to me that, because none of our singers were available, they were all it was Caden from Hyrax, Randy from Lamb of God, Mark Osagueda from Death Angel, were the main three guys. And so they're not available here locally to practice. So Chris Contos, who was one of the two drummers, and Mark Hernandez being the other, and Will Carroll from Death Angel too, but he was on tour. So all those guys are gone. And Chris said, why don't you call up Norman Skinner? I'm like, oh yeah, Norman's really good. Yeah, he's a good singer. Forbidden's played with him. We did shows. Our last show in the Bay Area was with Skinner. So I've played with Norman. I've seen him sing. I was like, yeah, he's really good. Didn't even occur to me, dude. Not even an inkling of it. But the set for Europe had Off the Edge in it. And I said at practice, after Norman was blowing our minds singing everything else, dude, he sounded great singing everything else. I said, well, we might as well run through Off the Edge. And when Matt started it and Norman kind of grabbed the mic extra, he had an extra, like, okay. I'm like, okay. And Matt started, and I'm like, wait a minute. None of us are playing this. In my head, I'm like, not one of these guys is going to be playing this in Europe. Why are we doing this? But I'll just give it a try. So we ended up doing it, even though I thought about stopping it. Wait a minute, why? Because, Norman's not going, and none of the guys here were going to play it. But then when the vocals started, dude, that was like, I was like, what the fuck? Because you have to have that power that Russ has, and the air and the fire, even for the simplest song on the album, like Off the Edge. There's something going on there that most guys can't even come close to doing. And Norman sounded not just like Russ, but he sounded like a guy owning it. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then the door opens and Contos is out there. He's like, oh, what? And then Harold Osehead pops up over him. He's all, and then they close the door, and I was like, yeah, I hear it. But I wasn't still ready. And then fast forward, we did that. We come back, we do a Bay Area one. I asked Norman to sing 8 songs, and my idea was to, because he was so good, I'm like, you just sing, because we did like 30-something songs of the Bay Area one. That everybody, I said, I want you to do Chalice of Blood with Warbringer. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. And we never practiced it. Not once did we practice it. Warbringer comes in the night before at SIR, big rehearsal studio in San Francisco. And then it's their turn to do Chalice of Blood in the room. And there's a bunch of people in the room. I'm sitting there watching. And they start it. And then Norman does the scream to start the song. I'm like, huh. And then he actually starts singing. And I felt there's about 20 people in the room. Everyone just kind of like slowly look at me like, I'm like, yeah, I hear it. I hear it too. He's awfully good singing this stuff. And then the show happens, and I'm standing on the side of the stage, and it was even better. And I was like, holy fuck, this guy's really good. And still, I didn't accept it. It wasn't until we got an email from Alcatraz saying, would you be interested in the 35th anniversary? Would you be interested in playing, songs from Forbidden Evil? And and this is what they said, paraphrasing, would you be interested in doing it with another singer because Russ isn't singing anymore? I know he's retired and he's not well. And would you also be interested in having Chris Contos play drums, because it makes a great story, for the people in Europe that love Burn My Eyes? And I'm like, oh, fuck. That was the moment. And I wasn't even going to say yes to Chris yet. Chris was not my idea for a drummer. I played with him already. I didn't want to overextend it. So that was the moment, though, where I called my manager. I said, look, dude, the universe is telling me that we have to do this. Like, let's get this show done. Let's see what happens. And I'm going to talk to the guys and see how they feel about it. So I called up Matt and asked him how he felt about it. He's like, yes. And I told him Norman should be the singer. He's like, yes, there's no one else, you know. So Matt was all over it. Same with Steve Smythe. He's like, yeah, and he really needed it because Steve Smythe's wife had passed away a few months ago, and cancer. It was really sad. So, but he needs it, you know. And he was like, this is great. This is what my wife would have wanted. Forbidden was like one of her 2 favorite thrash metal bands of all time. And then I reached out to Norman, and I didn't even get through the sentence. He's all, I'm in. He's like, yeah. So then I had to find a drummer, talk to numerous great drummers, world-class guys. Don't want to drop all their names, but they may not, you know, they're in other bands too, but they wanted to put everything aside to do it. Some guys could, some guys couldn't, but none of them lived here. And then I reached out to Chris and said, look, dude, I'm going to do this. And I've already talked to these drummers. He's all, yeah, here's some more suggestions for other drummers. Like, he's like, yeah, I don't want to fuck with our friendship. Same thing, you know. And more credit to him for thinking like that. Like, it was really cool. And then I was about to pull the trigger, and I call him back. I'm like, bro, you live here. I love you. We write great together. We hang out all the time. Why the fuck aren't you doing this? And he's like, let's do it. And that's how it kind of came to happen.
Wow.
You know, it's like I almost pulled the trigger on somebody else coming in from out of town, which would have been another pain in the ass.
Yeah, no. It almost seems like that this was a very like organic way to make something happen. I mean, it almost shows a lot more of just not the camaraderie of Forbidden, but it shows just the camaraderie of Bay Area, the community in general, just the way that you all came together. Because, you know, you look at the history too. You guys, it seems like Forbidden is almost kind of like a smorgasbord of Bay Area thrash, because you kind of have like people from different generations involved and like different eras who witnessed different stuff. You know what I mean? So
Right. So, well, you know, I was told by a few people, you should get some young snappers to play and make it easy on yourself. Well, they can't do it. They don't. I mean, Warbringer did a damn good job, but they had to run through. I had to, you know, teach the lead guitar player parts of the song because it's fucking hard. And he's like, I can't quite make this out and how to do this. It's like you got to have that old school experience. You got to love the Beatles as much as you love, you know, Exodus. You know what I mean? Like there's just something, you know, in the all the confluence of influences, you know.
Yeah. What's your favorite Beatles album?
Oh, I don't have one. They switch around. Abbey Road, White Album, Sgt. Pepper's, Revolver. They all switch around.
Am I the only one who has Help?
Sometimes it's Magical Mystery Tour.
Okay. Help has always been my favorite. But I'm always like a minority in that.
No, it's a great album. And then we can talk about this for hours. But I would say that Rubber Soul is their most punk rock album.
I agree.
There's something like right on the edge of Rubber Soul where it's got a lot of energy. And, you know, that was the last they played live. Like, they never did live after that one.
Yeah, I mean...
You know, or that was the last one they fuck with it.
Yeah, I mean, Help is nostalgic for me because it was also, like, my first... The movie was, like, one of my first movies as a child.
Oh, shit.
So, like...
Not many people have seen that, yeah.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
You're no wonder you're so worldly in your questions. Because if you don't understand that the Beatles are the most important ingredient, you know, in all of this that we do... You know, people, I don't really like the Beatles. You know, I prefer the Stones. I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I love the Stones. I love the Stones. But the Stones were all nice college boys and came from, you know, wealthy situations. And the Beatles were fucking hard kids in the streets. You know, the Beatles were tough. I mean, they weren't like, John Lennon would fight you. But they came from fucking down and out, lower middle class lifestyle and played, you know, 10 hours, 12 hours a day to learn how to be what they were, and that's the kind of work that nobody will do anymore.
It was a rule in my household growing up by my father, who's a musician. The Beatles have to be the best band in the world. Any condescending opinion is wrong. So,
I like your dad.
That makes one of us. No, I'm kidding. But sorry, Dad, if you're watching.
That's a family thing.
Sorry, Dad, if you're watching.
So yeah,
this.
so the new blood. That's the new blood's huge, and I absolutely adore all these guys. Getting to know Norman has been great, but he's a very convincing front person that's been waiting for this opportunity, dude. Like, what people are going to see, and Russ is the greatest, in my opinion. He's the greatest. He had more tools than anybody else. But what people are immediately going to see is that Norman his enthusiasm and energy is what Russ should have been able to bring the last time that he couldn't do because of his physical situation.
Of course.
you know, and he's cool. Like Russ doesn't want to be here. He's totally cool with all this. He said years ago, he said, if you want to do it with another singer, do it. I can't do it. You know, I just can't. And I never did. And I never thought I would.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the end, the show does have to go on, and different musicians have served their purpose and did what they had to do. You can't have I feel, especially with the music of your intensity, if you have, you can't have a musician who's somebody's heart isn't into it or just isn't there. Like, I don't believe that a band, all the musicians have to be in the same headspace 24/7, whether it will be in writing or playing, but the passion, the amount of passion has to be there, and not to say that Russ doesn't have the passion, but I think in the end, to have new blood in it brings a new lease of life to the band.
Yeah. Ideally, you're correct, but you'd be amazed at how many bands have members in it that totally punch it in, and there's enough greatness happening around them to accommodate for it.
Okay.
It's very common, and I'm not. I mean, if you really look around, you'll see it. There's the guy that's into it, and there's the guy that's just standing there, that's like kind of, it's been a long time since Forbidden had 5 members who were all enthusiastic.
Yeah.
So I can't project exactly what we're going to be like live, but I would imagine it's going to be a lot more intense.
Yeah. It's going to be heavy as hell. But I always think that the metal world and the rock world has the most passion behind it in general. And I'm not like saying that this isn't prevalent in like a lot of popular music. I actually don't hate on pop music like a lot of people would. But like, in the end, nobody is going into the realm of heavy metal thinking that they're going to be rich. You know what I mean? They're going into it because they love the music. That's how I think it goes into it,
Yeah. I mean, I think that mostly, like I said, there are trend chasers. There are people that don't know how to do it. There are also people. There's that, and then there's people that don't know how to do anything else, and they're paralyzed to take chances and do other things. And I think a lot of my peers qualify for that. That's why they've only done one thing, because they're just absolutely petrified of rejection and that searching for your voice outside of what you normally would do. I think that that's a very common trait in metal people. Like, this is all I know how to do. Oh my God, I can't try anything else.
Yeah.
And it's getting better these days. I think people reach out more, but there's a point in the 90s where guys were just fucking jaded and freaking out and paralyzed because they didn't know how to do anything else besides what they did originally.
Well, you're damned if
so
you
that's
do.
The journey that I went on,
Well, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't, in terms of like how
You
people
are.
receive it. Like, if you do the same thing, you're repetitive, there's no evolution, and you're kind of just rolling with the punches. But if you change too much, you're a sellout, or you are inconsistent or not being genuine. So in the end, I think it is instinct that has to sort of go along with what you do.
Yeah, and that is another reason why I'm really glad to be playing with Chris Contos, and I'm glad that we had this talk and almost didn't do it, but we did, because what people know Chris from, obviously Burn My Eyes. A lot of people know from Attitude Adjustment in the day and all the old punk bands around here. We played together for a few years in Spiral Arms, wrote massive rock songs, but the guy's got producer ears. His dad was a very famous producer. And he's got like kind of an overview of music, which I'm going to really welcome into the picture, because I can really trust his opinion. He's always got like, he listen to that, and be like, yeah, but maybe this, and it's always a good opinion. And if you disagree, he'll listen and you figure it out. But I just feel like everything I've done with Chris, including that Boneless Ones record, is better because Chris is on it, because he has this wonderful sense of what greatness is. He knows, he's the rock and roll encyclopedia, dude. Probably him and Will Carroll in the Bay Area, and Harold O, are the main dudes who can tell you everything about everything. And Chris is one of those guys, but he could do it with punk, he could do it with classic rock, and he does it with metal.
And that's a fucking awesome combination, and I can't wait to finally see, hopefully get my chance to finally see Forbidden live. And that led me to, before we go, is there just anything else with Forbidden we could be expecting in terms of live shows? Could we be expecting maybe a full Forbidden tour? I think it's just shows that are announced right now, but could we be expecting a Forbidden tour and hopefully coming to New York City?
Yeah, I the business model is different now. I mean, I could easily, the easy answer is, oh yeah, you can expect a full on tour. That'll happen to a certain extent. But right now, our priority has to be Alcatraz Festival, and then when we come home, we have to write because I want to put out an album either by the end of next year or the beginning of 2025, which means it's going to take a lot of work and time and writing. So I think people really want an album more than they just want us to beat down the old songs over and over again. You got to kind of put it all together, something new, something old. But our focus is on that show for now, and we're gonna maybe do a warm-up show in Belgium a couple days before. They've offered us that, which is probably a good, prudent thing to do. And then we're going to do something in the Bay Area towards the end of the year, and then our books are all opened up for 2024, and likely to do a lot of the festivals. They're already offering us a lot of festivals in Europe and a few in the United States already. And that's likely what it's going to be for 2024. I don't know that we're going to get, if there's anything close to New York, it would probably be like a one-off show there in New York City or something, or a festival that's close, because I think we have to play for the maximum amount of people where it's beneficial, and we're not just playing every little town along the way, because that you can't do that and survive anymore. You got to be smart about what you do. So if there's an album out and then there's a whole bunch of momentum behind it, then we'll consider taking it out for longer periods. But I think right now it's like all the good festivals, small, big, whatever makes sense. And Europe is going to just get inundated with them, and South America and possibly some of Asia.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll just better. Good thing I renewed my passport, if anything. So I'll be following you around.
If I were you, I'd go to Alcatraz, man. It's just going to be insane. We're going to do the whole album, and we're doing Forbidden Evil in its entirety, and a few other songs to sandwich it.
Wow. Okay, so yeah, I might have to take a trip out there again. You might be convincing me, but thank you so much.
It's gonna be fun. Have you looked at the lineup?
I haven't seen the full lineup yet, but I'm gonna pull it up now. Actually, hold on.
3 days, dude, of amazing bands. We're taking that Anthrax spot on the first day on the Friday.
Oh, okay, yeah, I saw this lineup before. Holy shit, yeah, okay. This'll. I mean, you guys alone is a reason to go, but I definitely want to check out this lineup. All right, I gotta make a few calls.
Pretty cool that Agnostic Front's playing right before us. I love that.
Hey, get a taste of New York.
I love
hardcore.
those guys.
Some New York hardcore. Before.
Well, those guys love them. All the New York hardcore bands love them. Some Chris Contos.
Yeah.
Every time we run into, and the Biohazard guys they're all freaking out. And Chris is freaking out. Like, we all get to play together. Woo! We're playing with them at Dynamo the following week with the Homeless Ones. Yeah, the Homeless Ones are playing Dynamo that following week.
Okay. I am gonna probably watch you guys from the side and avoid that pit. Just for safety precautions, but
yeah, those festivals, you don't really got to worry about it there. Like, it's funny, man. Occasionally they'll break out a really big pit, but the festivals are a lot of people really paying attention to you, a lot of headbanging, but they do. I mean, they pit, but I'm sure they will for Forbidden. But even for like bands like Behemoth, I've sat there and people are just like entranced watching. Like, it's not. I saw a couple pits break out for Testament at Alcatraz this last time, because we played there last year. Dress the Dead, my other band, played there last year.
Okay.
And I watched a lot of great fucking shows there. They have 2 tents that constantly run. It's like they run, no one's playing at the same time. It's always like moving around, and we're playing on the main stage.
Hell yeah. Well, I look forward to seeing you guys. Thank you so much, everybody. We are here with the almighty Forbidden. New stuff coming very soon. Catch them at Alcatraz Festival. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.